Can you move, Freak says. I don't think so. It's true. The mud is up over my knees and I'm locked in place. I can't even fall down. That's how stiff it is. I'm like a big fence post, and everybody knows a fence post makes a good target. Okay, I do remember that. I'm reading that yesterday, but that's okay. More splat. So wait, what do they mean by that? Why does a fence post make a good target? It sticks up, it doesn't move, it's just there, right? More splashes as the rocks fall short. At first they're throwing stuff that's too heavy. Pretty soon they smarten up and Blade says, "Smaller rocks, get me smaller rocks." And I know in my heart, we're doomed. Then, above me, there's a really loud, high-pitched screech. Freak has his fingers in his mouth and he's whistling, real shrill and shivery and so loud it almost hurts my ears. And then I see what Freak has been seeing all along, a cop car cruising real slow along the road around the pond, which is what they always do after the fireworks. Freak is whistling and the cop car spotlight comes beaming around the pond until it settles on us. I'm blinking because the light is so bright and Freak is making a fuss and waving his arms, and we hear the metal megaphone sound of a cop ordering us not to move, like we could even if we wanted. It's hard to see in the glare of the spotlight, but Freak tells me that Blade and his punks are running away, like snakes on sneakers, Freak says. "Officers," Freak is shouting into the white light, "we request assistance." They finally have to use ropes to pull me out of there. Freak won't let go. He stays right where he is on top of my shoulders, even when this cop in a boat tries to lift him off. And then we're up on the bank of the pond, and everybody is being real nice and giving us blankets and cokes and saying they know all about Tony D, and they'll keep an eye on him. Don't you worry. "Okay, boys, you better give us your names and we'll call your mothers," this one cop is saying. And there's this other guy who is looking at me funny, and he says, "Hey, isn't that Kenny Kane's boy?" "Must be. Old Killer Kane. Is he still inside?" What do you think they mean by inside? Inside jail, inside prison, right? If you ever hear someone talking about being on the inside, they're usually talking about like prison. Killer Kane. We figured he was a killer already, right? Did we already know that he killed someone? Okay.
No.
Freak is still holding tight to my shoulders, and when they ask him for his name, he says, "We're Freak the Mighty, that's who we are. We're 9 feet tall, in case you haven't noticed." That's how it started. Really how we got to be Freak the Mighty, slaying dragons and fools and walking high above the world. So this is when they became Freak the Mighty. What do you think they mean by that? Like they... Well, Freak is Kevin, right? It's not a nice thing to call someone, but they seem to embrace it because Kevin has a lot of issues, right? He looks different. He's small. He's different. He talks different. He acts different, right? And then Mighty is probably referring to Max because he's so big and tall and strong. And so together, Freak the Mighty is referring to them as one unit. It's almost like the way a superhero would become, like Iron Man puts on all of his stuff and then he's Iron Man. If he doesn't have on all of his equipment, he's not Iron Man, right? Well, or he always is. Maybe Batman then, right? I don't know much about superheroes, something like that. Alright, we're going to continue through Chapter 8 and then do our quiz today. Chapter 8 is called Dinosaur Brain. It turned out to be a cool summer. I figured we'd get in trouble for running into the pond. It looked bad for a while, and then the cops drove us home, and I got out all soaking wet and covered with gook. And when Grim was hosing me down, he had this really pruny look on his face, like he was smelling something bad. But the cops made out like I was a hero or something, rescuing the poor crippled midget kid. So Grim listens to the cops, and then he gives me this weird look, like, imagine my surprise. And he goes into the house, and then Graham comes running out of her nightgown with this big fluffy towel, and she makes a fuss. So why do you think Grim would be surprised?
Because the only time she lets him go on his own, he gets in trouble.
Okay, maybe he usually gets in trouble. I think there's a lot of feeling like he's going to get in trouble because of
His face.
what is his dad. Thank you. His dad did something really terrible, and I think Grim and Graham are always a little bit nervous that Max is going to turn out like his dad because he looks like his dad and everything else. And so when the cops show up with him, they were probably thinking, oh no, what happened? I mean, usually when cops show up at your house, it's probably not always a good thing, right? Not that it ever happened to y'all, I'm sure, but I'm saying if they showed up at my house, I would probably be a little nervous, right? So you usually think something bad, but in this case, it was a good thing. They called him a hero, and so they're a little surprised. Me, rescuing Freak. What a joke, right? Except that's how it must have looked from a distance, because they never knew it was Freak who rescued me, or his genius brain and my big dumb body. Graham is there rubbing me with the towel, and it is kind of interesting. It's like people don't recognize Freak's talents as much as maybe they should because of all the issues that he has. Because Max kind of froze up, and Freak was the one who told him what to do, right? Her hands are shaking, and she's saying, "Oh, I saw those blue lights, and I thought the worst." And Grim is behind her, looking at me real intense and shaking his head, and he's saying, "Who'd have thunk it, Mabel?" Which is some kind of joke because Graham's name isn't Mabel. Anyhow, they take me inside, and the first thing Graham does is give me a bowl of ice cream, and Grim, he keeps shaking his head, and he goes, what this young man needs is a cup of coffee, real coffee. And then he gets busy putting the filter in the machine and measuring out the coffee and standing by while it drips through. And he's got this stern look like he's thinking deep thoughts. By the time I polish off the ice cream, Grim is handing me a coffee in a china cup from the set they never use. He gives me that cup like it's a big deal, a really big deal, because I'm not allowed to drink coffee yet, and he's so grim-like and serious. I open my mouth to say, what's the big deal? You really think this is my first cup of coffee? Yeah, right. And something happens, and the words come out. Thank you, sir. And it's like I'm possessed or something. I have no idea where these things I'm saying are coming from or why. I go, thanks for the towel, Graham, and the ice cream. Could I have sugar in the coffee? 2 teaspoons, please. And Grim claps his hands together and says, of course you can, son. And it's like, whoa, because he never calls me that. Always Max or Maxwell or that boy. Next thing, he's clearing his throat and coughing into his fist, and Graham is looking at the two of us, and she gets this Graham-like glow, this is how it's supposed to be. The way things always happen on the Wonder Years, with the family getting all gooey and sentimental about some numb thing the bratty kid did while he's having all his wonderful years or whatever. You guys know what the Wonder Years is? It's a show that used to be on TV when I was probably in high school. But it's set back in the older, like in the 50s. It's a really good show. It might be on Netflix or something now, the reruns. But you know, a lot of times on family sitcoms, they have some drama, and then by the end of the show, everything comes together and gets fixed, and it's all happy and sappy. So that's what they're comparing that to. Graham says, I want you to promise me something, Maxwell dear. Promise me you'll keep away from the hoodlum boy and his awful friends. Nobody got hurt this time, but I shudder to think what might have happened. Who's the hoodlum boy? Tony D and his gang, yep. And Grim, bless his pointed little head, he goes, Maxwell can handle himself, can't you, Max? Right, Max, not son, which is okay by me. I can run, I say to Graham. I see Tony D, and that's what I'll do. Good boy, Graham says. I thought because you're so much bigger than he is. Well, you just do that, dear. You run away. He's not running away, Grim says, real impatient. He's taking evasive action, avoiding a confrontation. That's a very different thing, right, Max? So they're saying Max could probably easily defend himself because he's so much bigger than these other kids, even Tony D. But they don't really want him to get in a fight. I nod and drink my coffee without slurping and decide it's better not to mention that Tony D carries a knife, and he's probably got guns too, because then Graham would only worry, and she's such a clunker when she's worried. Like I said, it turns out to be a pretty cool summer. Usually what I do is just hang around and look at my comic books and watch the tube, or I go shopping with Graham if she makes a fuss. I hate the beach because the beach is stupid. The cool crowd looking sleek and tanned, and aren't we gorgeous, and because if you saw me lying on a blanket, you'd go, hey, why is that albino walrus wearing sunglasses? So mostly I just vegetate in the basement and pick my navel, to quote Grimm, Mr. Bellybutton lent himself. Ew. Freak changes all that. Each and every morning the little dude humps himself over and he bangs on the bulkhead. Wonka, wonka, wonka. He may be small, but he sure is noisy. Get out of bed, you lazy beast. There are fair maidens to rescue, dragons to slay. Which is what he says every single morning. Exactly the same thing. Until it's like he's this alarm clock, and as soon as I hear the wonka, wonka, wonka of him beating up the bulkhead, I know what's coming next. Fair maidens and dragons, and Freak with that wake-up-the-world grin of his, going, hurry up with the cereal. How can you eat so much, you big ox? Come on, let's do something. He's so full of ever-ready energy. You can practically hear his brain humming, and he never can sit still. Ants in the pants, I say one morning when he's ready to yank the cereal bowl off the table. He's in such a hurry to do something, and he goes, what? And I go, you must have ants in your pants. And he gets this funny look, and he goes, that's what the fair Gwen always says. Did she tell you to say that? I shake my head and finish the cereal real slow, and Freak goes, for your information, there are 2,247 known subspecies of hymenopteran insects. Latin name, Formicidae, and none of them are in my pants. Those were some hard words. I may have stumbled on them a little bit myself. Which cracks me up, even though I don't understand a word he's saying. I propose a quest, he says. We shall journey to the far east and see what lies there. By now I know what a quest is, because Freak has explained the whole deal and how it started with King Arthur trying to keep all his knights busy by making them do things that proved how strong and brave and smart they were. Or sometimes how totally numb, because how else can you explain dudes running around inside big clunky tin cans and praying all the time? Which I don't mention to Freak because he's very sensitive about knights and quests and secret meanings. Like how a dragon isn't really just a big slimy fire-breathing monster. It's a symbol of nature or something. A dragon is fear of the natural world, Freak says, an archetype of the unknown. I go, what's an archetype? And Freak sighs and shakes his head and reaches into his knapsack for his dictionary. This is true. He really does keep a dictionary in his knapsack. It's his favorite book. And he pulls it out like Arnold Schwarzenegger pulling out a machine gun or something. That's the fierce look he gets with a book in his hands. Go on, he says, making me take the book. Look it up. And now I wish I hadn't said anything about this archetype dude because I hate looking up stuff in his stupid dictionary. Start with A, he says. I know that. A-R, he says. Just go along the A's until you come to A-R. Yeah, right. Easy for a genius to use the dictionary since he already knows how to spell the words. And R's never look like backward E's to Freak, which is the way they look to me sometimes, unless I really squint and think about it. Careful, he says. You'll bite off your tongue and then we'll have to waste the day at the emergency room getting it reattached. Microsurgery is such a bore. Didn't anybody ever tell you that? Huh? I say. But I do close my mouth so my tongue doesn't stick out. I'm still looking in the dictionary for archetype, and I'm looking for words that are underlined with red ink because that's what Freak does the first time he looks up a word. He makes a line under it, and you'll be amazed how many are underlined. There are whole pages like that where he's looked up every single word. Finally, he spells out all the letters for me, and I find the stupid word. There's nothing about dragons here, I say, squinting hard at the stuff under the word. It just says pattern. So what is it, a sewing type of thing? You guys might not know that, but usually people who sew a lot, they buy something called a pattern first, and it has cut out pieces that you can use to cut out parts of material, and it kind of gives directions step by step on how to put together jeans or a dress or whatever it is that you want to sew. So that's why he thought of sewing whenever he saw pattern. Probably Graham sews. Freak has this disgusted look, and he takes the dictionary and he goes, "You're hopeless. Pattern is the first definition. I was referring to the second definition, which is much more interesting. A universal symbol or idea in the psyche, expressed in dreams or dreamlike images. Like that helps, right? I'm getting bored with the dictionary, so I pretend to understand, and Freak gives up, and he shakes his head and goes, I don't know why I bother. Dinosaurs had brains the size of peanuts, and they ruled the earth for 100 million years. And that's where the title Dinosaur Brain came from, I guess. What do you think he meant by that?